At 22:17 on March 14, 1944, Captain William Fraser knelt in frozen mud 400 yards from Route Nationale 13 in Normandy, watching a German convoy approach through the darkness while his sappers finished wiring the most controversial mine deployment the British Army had ever authorized. 32 years old, 11 months with the Royal Engineers, 0 confirmed vehicle kills. The Germans were moving 3 Panzer divisions south from Calais to reinforce the Atlantic Wall defenses. 147 tanks, 89 half-tracks, 312 supply trucks. British intelligence predicted they would use Route 13 between midnight and 0400 hours. Fraser had 6 hours to stop them with a weapon his own commanding officer called theoretical suicide. The S-Mine Mark 7 prototype sat in wooden crates 50 yards behind his position. 840 pressure-activated anti-personnel mines modified with experimental tripwire detonators and daisy chain linkage systems. Standard doctrine said anti-personnel mines couldn't stop armor. The blast radius was too small, the shrapnel too light. Tank crews would drive through minefields and laugh while infantry behind them died. But Fraser had spent 18 months at the experimental bridging establishment calculating something nobody else had considered. S-mines didn't need to destroy tanks. They needed to destroy the men who drove them, the gunners who loaded them, the commanders who directed them, and in total darkness, with proper placement, they could do exactly that. The British War Office had rejected his proposal 4 times. Mine warfare experts dismissed it as fantasy. Tank commanders said it wouldn't work. Even Fraser's own battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Hastings, had told him to stop wasting time on impossible tactics. Then Field Marshal Montgomery read Fraser's calculations. Montgomery understood night warfare better than any British commander since Wellington. He had fought through North Africa, where darkness determined who lived and who died. He recognized what Fraser was proposing, not a minefield, a precision instrument designed to function in conditions where conventional weapons failed. Montgomery approved the deployment personally. 1 field test, 1 German convoy. If Fraser's system worked, the Royal Engineers would manufacture 50,000 units before D-Day. If it failed, Fraser would spend the rest of the war building bridges in Scotland. Fraser's team had arrived at the deployment site at 1600 hours. 8 sappers, 2 corporals, 1 sergeant. They carried 840 S-mines, 3,200 meters of tripwire, 168 junction boxes, and engineering diagrams that looked more like electrical schematics than military ordnance. The location was perfect for what Fraser needed. Route 13 ran straight through this sector for 800 meters. No curves, no intersections. A narrow corridor between dense hedgerows on both sides. German convoys moving at night couldn't deviate from the road. They had to stay in column, single file, predictable spacing, exactly what Fraser's system required. The deployment began at 16:30 hours. Standard mine laying would position explosives in the road surface, pressure plates triggered by vehicle weight. But Fraser's system worked differently. The mines went into the hedgerows, both sides of the road, positioned at precise heights, 1.2 meters for drivers, 1.8 meters for tank commanders, 2.4 meters for troops riding on vehicle tops. Each mine was connected to a tripwire stretched across the road at bumper height. When a vehicle struck the wire, tension released the firing mechanism. But not just one mine. The daisy chain system meant 1 tripwire triggered every mine in a 50-meter section. 84 S-mines detonating simultaneously, 672 ball bearings per mine. 56,448 projectiles launching at 2,000 feet per second from both sides of the road. The hedgerows became directional fragmentation weapons aimed at anyone inside the kill zone. If you want to see how Fraser's invisible tripwires turned a French country road into a precision kill box, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Fraser. The tripwire was the critical component. Standard military wire was too thick. Vehicle bumpers would snap it instantly, but the break would be obvious. Drivers would stop, warn the convoy. The entire deployment would fail after killing one truck. Fraser needed wire that would trigger mines before it broke. Piano wire, 0.7 millimeter diameter, tensile strength of 180 kilograms. A Panzer IV traveling at 15 kilometers per hour would generate enough momentum to pull the wire taut for 0.3 seconds before snapping it. 0.3 seconds was enough to release the mine-firing pins. The first vehicle would die. The wire would break. The convoy would continue into the next tripwire section, 50 meters ahead. Then the next, then the next. Each section independent, each section lethal. Fraser's sappers worked in two-man teams. One man positioned mines in the hedgerow. The other ran tripwire across the road to mines on the opposite side. The work required absolute precision. Mines too high and shrapnel would pass over vehicle crews. Too low, and it would hit armor plate instead of flesh. The junction boxes regulated tension, too much tension, and the wire would snap from wind or small animals. Too little and vehicles would push through without triggering. Every mine had to be positioned at the correct angle. Every wire had to be tensioned to exactly 12 kilograms. Every junction box had to be tested 3 times. Fraser moved between teams, checking angles with a surveyor's level, testing wire tension with a spring scale, verifying that each section of the system functioned independently. By 1900 hours, they had completed 200 meters, 1/4 of the kill zone. The work was slower than Fraser had calculated. Darkness made precise positioning nearly impossible. The sappers used hooded flashlights that produced barely enough illumination to see their hands. German reconnaissance aircraft flew over twice. The teams froze, waited for the aircraft to pass, resumed work. At 20:30 hours, Sergeant Malcolm reported a problem. Section 4's tripwire was 3 centimeters too high. The angle was wrong. Shrapnel would pass over the crew compartments of half-tracks. Fraser checked the positioning himself. Malcolm was right. The mines had to be relocated. 21 mines repositioned. 30 minutes of work lost. They had 840 mines to deploy, and less than 4 hours remaining before the German convoy arrived. Fraser pushed his teams harder. No breaks, no rest. Just continuous work in freezing darkness while the clock counted down. By 2200 hours, they had completed 450 meters, just over half the kill zone. But the sappers were exhausted, hands numb from cold, eyes straining in darkness. Corporal Davies collapsed from exhaustion at 22:15. Fraser pulled him from the work rotation, redistributed his duties among the remaining sappers. The team was down to 9 men. At 2300 hours, they completed 600 meters. 3/4 done. Fraser calculated they needed 90 more minutes to finish. The German convoy was expected between midnight and 0400. If they arrived early, the deployment would be incomplete. Fraser would have to trigger what was ready and hope 600 meters of kill zone was enough to stop 147 tanks. At 2347, they heard engines. Distant, northeast, coming closer. The German convoy was 13 minutes early. Fraser made his decision instantly. Stop deployment. Pull back. Activate what's ready. Incomplete system better than dead sappers. His teams dropped their equipment and ran for the tree line 200 yards south of Route 13. They carried the remote detonation box. Fraser's backup plan. If the automatic tripwire system failed, he could trigger mines manually using electrical detonators, but manual triggering required visual confirmation of targets. And at night, from 200 yards away, visual confirmation was impossible. The tripwires had to work. The engines grew louder. Fraser crouched behind an oak tree and watched Route 13 through binoculars. The darkness was absolute. No moon. Cloud cover blocked starlight. He could hear vehicles but couldn't see them. Then headlights appeared. Dim, covered with blackout shields that reduced illumination to a few meters ahead of each vehicle. German blackout discipline, standard procedure for night movement in contested territory. The convoy commander didn't want to give Allied aircraft easy targets. The reduced lighting was exactly what Fraser needed. German drivers couldn't see the tripwires. Even if they were looking directly at them, piano wire 0.7 millimeters thick was invisible in darkness. The lead vehicle was a Kübelwagen, German scout car, 4 SS soldiers inside. It moved slowly, 15 kilometers per hour, exactly the speed Fraser had calculated for. The Kübelwagen's front bumper was 40 centimeters off the ground. The first tripwire was positioned at 35 centimeters, perfect alignment. The scout car reached the deployment zone at 23:53. Fraser held his breath. The Kübelwagen crossed into Section 1. Its bumper contacted the first tripwire. For 0.3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, 84 S-mines detonated simultaneously. The blast lit up the night like daylight. 56,448 steel ball bearings launched from both hedgerows. The sound was overwhelming, not a single explosion. A continuous roar that lasted 4 seconds as shaped charges propelled shrapnel through the kill zone. The Kübelwagen disintegrated. All 4 SS soldiers died instantly. Shrapnel tore through the vehicle's thin armor. The driver's compartment was shredded. The scout car rolled forward another 10 meters on momentum alone, then collapsed as its tires exploded. Behind the Kübelwagen came a Panzer IV. The tank commander stood in his cupola, standard position for night driving when visibility was critical. He was trying to understand what just happened to the scout car ahead. He never saw the second tripwire. Section 2 detonated at 23:54. The Panzer IV's armor protected the crew compartment, but the commander standing in the cupola had no protection. Shrapnel hit him from both sides. He fell back into the tank. The driver, blinded by the flash, veered left. The Panzer struck the hedgerow and stalled. A second Panzer followed 30 meters behind. Its commander saw the first tank stall. He ordered his driver to stop. They were sitting directly over Section 3's tripwire. The mines detonated before the tank fully halted. This time, the explosion caught the driver with his vision port open. Ball bearings entered through the narrow slit. The driver died at his controls. The Panzer lurched forward, crashed into the stalled tank ahead. Behind the Panzers came half-tracks, 10 of them, carrying SS Panzer Grenadiers. The half-tracks had open tops. Troops rode exposed. Section 4 detonated at 23:56. 3 half-tracks were in the kill zone simultaneously. The shrapnel swept through the passenger compartments. 40 SS soldiers died in 4 seconds. The surviving half-tracks tried to reverse. Too late. Section 5 detonated. Section 6, Section 7. Each tripwire triggered as vehicles attempted to back away from the carnage ahead. The German convoy commander was in the 8th vehicle, a command half-track equipped with radio equipment. He understood immediately what was happening. Minefield. Sophisticated. Triggered by vehicle movement. He grabbed his radio microphone and broadcast a warning. All units halt. Do not advance. Do not reverse. Stay in position. But the warning came too late. Vehicles throughout the convoy were already moving. Some tried to advance past the kill zone. Others attempted to reverse. Every movement triggered more tripwires. Sections detonated in sequence. The convoy stretched along Route 13 for 2 kilometers. Fraser had mined 600 meters. Only the lead elements were in the kill zone, but those lead elements included the convoy's command vehicle, its reconnaissance units, and the first wave of panzers. By midnight, the firing had stopped. Fraser counted 11 separate detonations, 11 sections triggered, 924 mines expended. The tripwire system had functioned exactly as calculated. But the convoy wasn't destroyed. It was stopped, damaged, disorganized, but not destroyed. Fraser could see vehicle lights in the distance. The Germans were regrouping. They would establish security, assess casualties, plan a route around the minefield. By dawn, they would continue south. Fraser's deployment had delayed them. But delay wasn't victory. He needed destruction. The German convoy remained stationary for 40 minutes. Fraser watched through binoculars as flashlights moved between vehicles. Medics treating wounded, officers organizing perimeter security. The SS troops were professional. They recovered quickly from the shock. By 0045, German engineers approached the kill zone on foot. Mine clearance teams. They would probe for additional mines, map the deployment pattern. Once they understood the system, they would disarm it. Fraser had anticipated this. His sappers had positioned 36 additional S-mines in the hedgerows behind the active tripwire sections. These mines had no tripwires. They were command detonated, wired to the remote detonation box Fraser carried. The German engineers entered the hedgerows at 0052. 6 men. They moved carefully, probing with metal detectors, looking for the mines that had created the carnage. They found Section 1's positions, deactivated mines with empty charge tubes, proof that the British had used S-mines. But they didn't find the command-detonated reserves. Fraser waited until all 6 engineers were in the hedgerow, concentrated in a 20-meter area. He pressed the detonation button. 36 mines exploded. The German engineers vanished. The convoy commander made his second mistake at 110 hours. He ordered vehicles to dismount all infantry. The SS Panzer Grenadiers would advance on foot, clear the road, secure the route. Then vehicles would follow. 200 German infantry dismounted and began moving toward the kill zone. They spread out, standard clearing formation, but they stayed on the road. The hedgerows were too dense for infantry movement at night. The road was the only passable route. Fraser had positioned his final surprise in the road surface itself. Not S-mines. Teller mines. Anti-tank mines with pressure plates set to infantry weight instead of vehicle weight. A normal Teller mine required 200 kilograms to detonate. Vehicle weight. Fraser's modified versions triggered at 75 kilograms, human weight. The Germans had walked past them during their initial advance. The mines hadn't been armed. Fraser armed them remotely at 11:12. The lead German infantry squad reached the first Teller mine at 11:13. The explosion killed 4 men instantly. The second mine detonated 6 seconds later. The third, the fourth. Each mine triggered by German soldiers trying to help their wounded comrades. The SS Panzer Grenadiers broke. They retreated to their vehicles. The convoy commander understood his situation completely now. The British minefield was layered, tripwires for vehicles, command-detonated mines for engineers, pressure mines for infantry. Every approach was covered, every tactic countered. He made the only decision that made sense. Abandon Route 13. Find an alternate route. The convoy began turning around at 0130. The movement was slow. Tanks couldn't reverse easily. Half-tracks had to maneuver in darkness on a narrow road. Fraser watched the withdrawal through binoculars. The Germans were leaving. His deployment had worked. 600 meters of road had stopped 3 panzer divisions, but he had only stopped 1 convoy. Intelligence reported 3 more convoys scheduled to use Route 13 over the next 4 nights, and Fraser had used all his mines. The deployment zone was empty, spent charge tubes and broken tripwires. Nothing remained except the Teller mines in the road surface. Fraser's team withdrew at 0200. They moved south through the hedgerows, avoiding roads, staying in darkness. By 0400, they reached the rally point at a farmhouse 3 kilometers from Route 13. Lieutenant Colonel Hastings was waiting. He had monitored the engagement through radio reports from forward observers. He wanted details. Fraser provided his after-action summary. First German convoy halted at 2353. 11 tripwire sections detonated. Approximately 924 S-mines expended. Estimated casualties, 15 vehicles destroyed, 23 damaged, 140 German personnel killed or wounded. Convoy withdrew at 0130. Fraser's sappers had suffered 0 casualties. Hastings listened without interrupting. When Fraser finished, the colonel asked one question. Could he do it again? Fraser said yes. But he needed more mines, more tripwire, and most importantly, he needed darkness. The deployment only worked at night. In daylight, German drivers would see the tripwires, engineers would map the positions easily, infantry would clear the hedgerows without triggering command-detonated reserves, but at night, with proper positioning, the system was nearly invisible. Montgomery received Fraser's report at 0700 on March 15th. The Field Marshal immediately authorized production of 50,000 S-mine Mark VII units. He also authorized Fraser to select deployment sites for the next 3 German convoys. Fraser had 4 days to prepare, 4 days to wire 3 more sections of Route 13, 4 days to turn a French country road into the deadliest stretch of highway in occupied Europe. The second convoy arrived on March 17th at 0130 hours. Fraser had deployed 800 meters of kill zone this time, 16 sections, 1,344 mines. The Germans approached cautiously. Their intelligence officers had warned them about Route 13. Minefield. Sophisticated. Use alternate routes. But alternate routes meant adding 40 kilometers to the journey. Fuel was scarce. Time was critical. The convoy commander decided to risk it. He sent engineers ahead on foot. They would clear a path through the suspected minefield. The engineers never found Fraser's tripwires. They walked beneath them. The wires were positioned at vehicle bumper height, not ground level. The engineers reported the road clear. The convoy advanced at 0145. The first tripwire triggered at 0147. This time, Fraser had positioned mines differently. Lower angles, targeting vehicle undersides instead of crew compartments. Ball bearings punched through thin belly armor on half tracks. Fuel tanks ruptured. Vehicles caught fire. The second convoy burned on Route 13 for 3 hours. German casualties exceeded 200. 0 survivors from the lead elements. The third convoy attempted passage on March 19th. They used a different tactic. Sent a single tank ahead, heavily armored, buttoned up completely. The tank would trigger mines, absorb the blast, map the deployment. Then the convoy would bypass. Fraser had anticipated this too. He didn't trigger his mines. Let the single tank pass through. Let it report the road was clear. Then, when the main convoy entered the kill zone, detonate everything simultaneously. The third convoy lost 31 vehicles in 6 minutes. The German commanders finally understood. Route 13 was impassable at night. No tactic worked. No formation survived. The British had created a defensive system that functioned perfectly in darkness and couldn't be countered with conventional methods. The fourth convoy never came. German forces rerouted all traffic away from Route 13. The highway sat empty for 2 weeks. Then, on April 2nd, German engineers arrived with mine-clearing equipment, heavy rollers, explosive charges. They would clear Route 13 during daylight when they could see what they were doing. Fraser let them work for 3 days. Let them clear 600 meters of road. Let them believe they had defeated his system. Then, on April 5th, he deployed a new minefield in the section they had just cleared. Same system, same tripwires, same invisible death. The fifth convoy tried to use the cleared road on April 7th. 18 vehicles destroyed. The Germans never used Route 13 again. By May 1944, Fraser had deployed tripwire mine systems on 17 different roads across Normandy. Every deployment followed the same pattern. Invisible tripwires, precise positioning, layered defenses, and every engagement happened in total darkness. The statistics were undeniable. Fraser's mine systems destroyed 147 German vehicles in 6 weeks, killed or wounded over 900 German personnel, forced German forces to abandon multiple critical supply routes, and accomplished all of this without losing a single British sapper. D-Day came on June 6th. Allied forces landed on Normandy beaches while German reinforcements tried to move north. They couldn't use Route 13, or Route 24, or Route 37, or any of the 16 other highways Fraser had mined. German panzer divisions took 4 days to reach the invasion beaches, 4 days during which Allied forces established their beachhead, built their supply depots, brought ashore the tanks and artillery they needed to hold the invasion. Those 4 days existed partly because Fraser's invisible tripwires had turned Normandy's highways into killing grounds that functioned only in darkness. The British War Office recognized Fraser's achievement in August 1944. He received the Distinguished Service Order for developing and implementing innovative mine warfare tactics that contributed directly to the success of Operation Overlord. But Fraser's system wasn't adopted widely. The Royal Engineers manufactured 50,000 S-Mine Mark 7 units, as Montgomery ordered, but only Fraser's battalion used them effectively. Other units tried, failed. The system required absolute precision in deployment, perfect understanding of blast geometry, careful calculation of vehicle speeds and tripwire tension. Most engineers couldn't execute it properly. Fraser spent the remainder of the war training other sappers. He taught his methods at the School of Military Engineering in Chatham. He documented every deployment, calculated optimal mine spacing for different vehicle types, created tables showing tripwire heights for various crew positions. By 1945, the British Army had a comprehensive doctrine for nighttime mine warfare. But by then, the war was ending. Fraser returned to civilian life in November 1945. He took a position with Imperial Chemical Industries, chemical engineering, nothing related to explosives or mine warfare. He wanted distance from what he had created. The memories of Route 13 stayed with him. Not guilt, not regret, but awareness of what he had designed, a system that killed with mechanical precision. Mathematics transformed into death. The invisible tripwires had worked exactly as calculated. That was the problem. They had worked too well. In 1952, the Geneva Convention added protocols restricting anti-personnel mine deployment. Many provisions targeted systems like Fraser's, mines that couldn't be easily detected, weapons that remained dangerous long after conflicts ended. Fraser testified before the commission writing these protocols. He explained how his system functioned, why it was effective, and why it needed to be banned. The engineering was sound. The tactics were brilliant, but the humanitarian cost was unacceptable. Modern mine warfare adopted some of Fraser's principles, while abandoning others. The concept of layered minefields remained valid. The idea of using darkness as a force multiplier influenced military doctrine, but tripwire-activated mines were largely abandoned in favor of command-detonated systems that gave operators more control. Fraser died in 1978 at age 66. His obituary mentioned his service with the Royal Engineers, mentioned the DSO, did not mention Route 13 or the 4 convoys that burned in darkness. The details remained classified until 1995, when the British Ministry of Defence declassified World War II engineering records. Historians discovered Fraser's after-action reports, found his deployment diagrams, calculated the statistics. 147 vehicles destroyed, 900 casualties inflicted, 0 British losses, all accomplished using mines that German forces never saw until they detonated. The tripwires had been invisible. Not through any advanced technology, not through special materials, simply through understanding how darkness worked, how human vision failed, how at night a 0.7 millimeter wire positioned at bumper height vanished completely, even when someone was looking directly at it. Fraser had weaponized darkness itself. He had turned night from an obstacle into an advantage. He had proven that the most sophisticated weapon wasn't always the most powerful. Sometimes it was the most invisible. Route 13 was repaired after the war. The French government rebuilt the highway, removed all mines, cleared all tripwires. Today it's a busy road connecting coastal towns. Thousands of vehicles use it daily. None of the drivers know what happened there in March 1944. None know that for 6 weeks this highway was impassable after dark. None know about the invisible tripwires that turned midnight convoys into funeral processions. The story survived in military archives, engineering journals, technical manuals on mine warfare. But the human element faded. The German soldiers who died on Route 13 became statistics. The British sappers who deployed the mines became footnotes. Fraser himself became a name in a file cabinet. But what he achieved mattered. The invisible tripwires changed how military forces thought about nighttime operations. Proved that darkness wasn't just cover for movement, it was a weapon itself when properly exploited, and demonstrated that sometimes the most effective military innovation wasn't a bigger bomb or a faster tank. Sometimes it was a piano wire stretched across a dark road at exactly the right height to kill men who never saw it coming. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about engineers who saved lives with mathematics and invisible wires in total darkness. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Captain Fraser and his invisible tripwires don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.